Programmable distributorless ignition, cheaper than a distributor. This is an EDIS ignition setup. It's put on a Ford 351 Windsor, but you can adapt this to any V8. To start from the beginning, I guess we'll start at the crank sensor. Crank sensor is just a Ford modular 4.6 liter cam sensor. If you use the crankshaft sensor off a modular engine, it's going to have a weird shape to it, but the cam sensor is real simple. It's like that, but it has an ear on it for the bolt to go through, and it's smooth. So what you do is you take that sensor and then you run it through with a tap. This is a 5/8 by 18 tap. You can tap the plastic and it'll give you a nice adjustable crank sensor. The crank sensors and the cam sensors, they're the same. It's just a VR sensor, and they both use that same kind of plug, so they're interchangeable. The bracket for the crank sensor I've just used from a junkyard. That's a Ford timing pointer that had a provision for a crank sensor off of like a Duraspark 3 system that used, some of them use crank sensors. And then I just bolted it on there and used studs to space it out, and then tightened up 2 bolts to lock it in place. And I also put a little welded a piece across it just to make it more stable. Kind of hard to see, but there's a piece right across here that I welded on there just so it's more rigid. Don't want that to move at all. The trigger wheel I found on eBay. A guy makes them. It's a 36 tooth minus 2 teeth trigger wheel. This one's for a small block Ford, but there's a whole bunch of them. They sell online, different sizes, different bolt patterns, and then there's universal ones too. When you set up your crank sensor, all you have to keep in mind is that when the engine is at top dead center, that the sensor is sitting on the 5th tooth after the missing teeth. So it really doesn't matter where you put that crank sensor. You could put it here, you could put it over on the other side, you could put it on the bottom, put it on the top, Just make sure that when you set up that wheel, when you bolt that wheel down, that crank sensor is on the 5th tooth. This line here, the sensor wire, it's very important that it be shielded. Under that plastic wrap, I have all kinds of tin foil wrapped around it, and then it's got a steel shielding on top of that too, just to make sure that you don't get any interference. I ran this coil along with these ones, which gives power to the coils, and it screwed it up. It misfired, and so it's just keep it separate. You can see I haven't got a separate hole for it to go through, and then just keep it away from everything. Onto the coils. These coils I just got at a junkyard. Junkyard coils look good as long as you check the resistance. As long as you have about 13 ohms between the pairs, the coils are good. I bought some coils on eBay that were brand new, and it was like a no-name brand, and I just attempted to buy them because they're real cheap and they look nice and they're all black, but they're way shittier than these junkyard coils. They were like all over the place. Like this one had 11, this one had like 14, so screw that. These here are just ignition capacitors. It's real important to have those too. It just keeps the noise down and makes it run better. Less chance of anything going wrong with the signal. The wires wires I bought, they're just a set off of a 1998 Ford Explorer that had a 302, and all I did was I bought 2 sets, and then I just ripped the ends out and took the longest ones out of the 2 and then reattached them here. It's not hard to do, and they're really cheap too. Everything on this setup is really cheap. These brackets here I got off of an English website. If I can find it, I'll put a link in the comments. I was going to use the Ford 302 adapt there coil bracket, but it turns the coils the other way where the plugs go into the sides, and I like just having everything come out of the back. Plus, with the firing order of a Ford, it gives it that neat kind of wraparound look, like front's going to the one side, the back's going the other side. Let me think. Things that are important inside the car, what controls it. Just pull this out. Alright, continuing on. This is the Megajolt E controller and the EDIS module. Now the EDIS modules, they sell them on eBay for like 60, 70 bucks. But go to a junkyard, you can pick them up for $15, $20. And this little controller is about 180 bucks. With this, you can set it up for vacuum advance. You can set it up for straight timing curve. You can lock it out. It has all kinds of options. If you look at their site and see what it does, it basically does everything that a MSD Programmable 6AL will do. You got rev limiter. It has retards for nitrous, start retards. You can set it up with different input switches to give you boost retard. It does everything, and for 180 bucks, you really can't beat it. I think the Programmable 6AL with a distributor starts, I think they're like over 400 bucks for that ignition. And like I said, you go to a junkyard, you save money with that on that EDIS module and with the coils too. I get everything I can from a junkyard. Just another note on making your crank sensor bracket. If you do use that factory Ford piece like I have, what you're going to do is you're going to drill out where the original sensor went in, because it was smaller, and then I just welded that 5/8 by 18 nut onto the hole where the sensor went, and then you thread in your crank sensor, and then I use another nut as a jam nut. And to time this, it's pretty easy. What I did is I took this off and I put the factory pointer back on, and then I turned the engine over to be right at 34 degrees. And then I put a white mark on the tooth so I know right when it's at 34, it's lined up, right even with this bracket. And then the Megajolt, it allows you to have 5 degrees plus or minus initial timing, so you don't have to, this wheel doesn't have to be exactly in place. So what you do is just when you initially start the car, you'll start it up and then set your timing to be right at 34 degrees, lock it out on the controller, and then use that offset to either add or subtract until you got your timing mark, right dead nuts. And then, once it's there, you can program it to do whatever you want, and it's always going to be exact. And another thing you have to do is you have to make a distributor plug, unless you have some kind of dry sump system. But for that, I just used the cheapest billet distributor I could find on eBay. I was going to use the factory one, but the factory one it wouldn't work because the bearing doesn't come up high enough. Or the bearing, I'm sorry, the bearing, it's too high. It sits up too high. It's like up here. So when you cut it down low, you're just left with like these 3 prongs to hold the shaft in place. But these billet ones, they've got a bronze bearing that it runs all the way down, probably about another inch below that to hold the shaft in place. And then, so you just cut the head of the distributor off. You drill a hole in there. You put in your pipe plug, tap it for the pipe plug, and then cut the shaft, a ways below that. And with these billet ones, like I said, there's still enough bearing in there to hold it in place. And there's a better view of the coil bracket. These are just brackets I got at the hardware store. They're like, for putting up shelves. And the straight thermostat housing that's available from, I believe it's Canton. They make that. And that's it.